So at the end of my fall semester, I knew that I wanted to pursue computer science, and about 2 days into my spring semester, I dropped out to teach myself how to code for a few months, and I used that knowledge to get myself an internship at I would say it's a medium-sized company that is just recently transitioning from being a smaller company. That being said, still a local company, Fusion Technologies. They make hospital software for correctional facilities. And I have learned a lot. My internship comes to an end next week. I will be doing like a final video close off, getting to some of the nitty gritty of what I would have done differently. But in this video, I just want to go over what I've learned from this experience and what I'm going to be bringing with me into my next internship. So without further ado, my name is Alex Bianchi. If you guys please leave a like, comment, and subscribe so that you can keep track of my computer science, software engineering journey. I try and give out some advice whenever I learn something. I try and tell stories that are relevant to you. So please like, comment, subscribe. Without further ado, let's get into it. And let's start with the first week at Fusion, where I didn't really write much code like most interns in their first week. I just got brushed up on what their technologies do, how their web apps work. And I had meetings and met with a lot of people, although I did look at a lot of code through different meetings as people kind of showed me what they were currently working on. So one thing with Fusion that kind of makes them unique from other companies is that they are a value-added provider for another electronic health record system. So what they do is they take this EHR and they go to different clients, different correctional facilities and institutions, and they say, we will sell you this and we will put our own engineering power behind tweaking it and giving you other features and applications so that it meets your specific needs as a correctional facility. So that's kind of the interesting part with Fusion, is that it is not a web app open to the public. It's not a web app run in a Chrome browser, although it is Chromium, the browser that runs it. It is a web app inside of a Windows application that hooks up to a database that Fusion doesn't control. That's kind of just context. It doesn't actually affect too much of the development. We're still doing the same development stuff, the same code standards, the same React, JavaScript, C#, .NET that everyone is used to in a web development environment. So my first task in the internship was pretty simple. It was to change these date time pickers that were in one of their appointment creation forms over from Kendo, which is one component library which had its own date time picker, into Material UI's date time picker, which itself kind of became a little bit bigger in scope than originally anticipated. And that's going to be somewhat of a recurring theme here. So it should just be as simple as, okay, open this file up, change the date time pickers, hook it up to the routes, and you're done. But not quite, because time zones are a unique thing that Fusion kind of has to deal with, different than most places, because if you are a correctional facility talking to a sister location in another time zone, there are some states with multiple time zones in the same state, then you're going to want to go by the time on your server so that everyone is on the same time and not the time of your local machine. So I have to kind of build the logic out to transition the date time pickers time to UTC, adjusting for the time zone that we grab from the server, and send that to the server. Still, not too complicated, relatively easy, except for the fact that the forum that I was adding the date time picker to was a Kendo forum, and it didn't really like mixing Material UI and Kendo together. It worked, it was functional, but it wasn't the right way to do things, so they said, okay, rewrite the forum. So again, not that big of a deal. Basically just building out a relatively complex form, autocomplete, bunch of data that had to be pre-populated, had to plug into the rest of the scheduling application. Again, not too big of a deal. I did wind up spending a decent amount of time on this form, and it was all on the front end. So I came in with a decent amount of React experience, JavaScript experience, not too much, just a couple of projects under my belt, but enough that I knew what was going on. So I was able to be relatively productive, and instead of kind of learning React and JavaScript, I was focused on learning TypeScript, which I had not had any experience with yet up until that point, as well as the kind of DevOps aspect to everything with GitHub, with managing your Jira tickets, and kind of the workflow of the team that I was partnered with. This whole time, I have a manager. There are other software engineers around me who are helping me, giving me advice. My manager has been fantastic. The QA engineer, just the entire engineering department has honestly been super supportive. So through this process, initially with the form, I was just building it out, transferring everything over, and getting advice from everyone about how to kind of position myself within the company. But after the form was done, which did take a few weeks, I was definitely learning, getting up to speed, still ramping up. And there were a couple of kind of setbacks where I would get the form build up and then something would change and the head of engineering would shift something around, which is fine. It happens. I wish it didn't happen quite as much as it did this internship, but it is what it is. After building the forum, I expressed to my manager that I really wanted to learn the backend. I wanted to learn C#, I wanted to learn .NET because I had no idea what was going on back there, and it was easily where I had the most to learn and where I thought me being in this professional environment, I would have the most to gain. I could teach myself front-end stuff at home relatively easy, but really diving into a complex framework like ASP.NET with a relatively advanced language, C#, that was something that I thought I could really take advantage of the support system that I had around me. So he assigned me to an entirely new project, which, again, the scope of the project, relatively simple, although it would fluctuate as I worked on it, which is dubbed Fusion Patient Search. So when you have this health record tracking application, there are a number of patients in the correctional facility that you need to be able to search by different identifiers, different parameters, and being able to build that out to be really dynamic and just take in any data that is associated with the patient, either in the patient's table or in associated tables that keep track of patient data as well, it all needed to be searchable. Currently, the EHR that, they kind of come out of the box with and add on to, it could only search for things that were in the patient profile table in the database. It wasn't able to go to these external tables and grab other relevant data. So that was my task, to build that out. At first, I started to build out the back end, really simple API stuff, getting a lot of help from my manager in the design of that. I also learned a lot in terms of AGILE and SCRUM and putting together a project from the ground up, getting all the tickets, organizing meetings to estimate user story points, and everything to do with that. I talked to product owners and Scrum Masters to understand, I, as an intern, I was still going to be not in charge. Like, I was not the one making decisions here, but I was definitely organizing and the center of attention for this project. If you needed to know something about this project, I was probably going to be the person to talk to and then maybe redirect you or maybe just answer your question. And after kind of estimating everything, all the story points, how much work we thought the project was going to take, it turned out to be a little bit more than originally anticipated, as there was a lot to build out, being that it is from the ground up and I didn't have something to go off of. And me having to learn ASP.NET and C#, we anticipated that my progress on the back end was going to be slower than they would normally expect from both me on the front end and just any other engineer. So I was paired with another engineer who was fantastic. He did a really great job of teaching me a lot about C# and .NET, and almost at the expense of the project, which would kind of come and complicate things in the future, but was really worth it because he just threw me in head first. And although he was kind of explicitly told not to over-engineer the project and not make it too dynamic, in the end of the day, it was supposed to be something real quick that could just be pushed out, tacked on, and as long as it worked, simple functions, only a few routes, it was good. He did kind of build it out from there, which in some ways overcomplicated things and definitely expanded the timeline that I was expected to work on the project, but also meant that I learned so much more than had I just done the simplest possible version of the app. So I really appreciate him doing that. And I think part of the reason he was able to, I'll just say, I don't want to say disregard, but just kind of do different than he was advised to do with regards to making the project as simple as possible, was that he was leaving in 2 weeks. He had already put in his 2 weeks resignation, and he really had nothing to learn, or nothing to lose, rather. So what he would tell me on his way out was that he just spent his last couple weeks setting me up for success and making sure that I learned as much as possible in my time at my internship. And that kind of like kamikaze teaching style, it's appreciated. I like it. It was definitely helpful, and he told me that he saw a lot of potential in me, and the conversation that we had while he was on his way out was fantastic. I really appreciated his input and all the work that he put into my patient search, or the patient search application, as well as just teaching me in general. So after he leaves, the project scope kind of gets pulled back as other people are more in charge of it, and it's not just him. There are motives that aren't just me learning associated with the project. There is a business analyst trying to put together a functional requirements document. There are people kind of expecting this to be done in a certain time. My manager is now in charge of kind of the API design and making sure all the code works great. And another associate engineer has been sitting down with me almost daily now and just going over the code that I'm writing and making sure that it's all working. So we kind of shifted from, after the engineer who was originally with me left, we shifted from just making sure I learn as much as possible to pumping out code and making sure it's quality code, making sure everything works right. And at this point, I will be honest that the structure that I had set up in Jira completely fell apart because the project had been expanded in scope and then shrunk in scope and kind of got re-expanded after a meeting with the client in terms of what they wanted to see from Fusion Patient Search. All of that left the organizational structure of the project plan in shambles, but I have been doing a good job in my own personal Confluence pages and notes, and in my own Jira, kind of keeping track of everything in a way that makes sense. And more recently, in the last few days, I've transferred everything into the more formal structure that you would expect from a corporation, from an application that isn't just a one-man show. So there was definitely a little bit of chaos, but I think I did an okay job of saying, okay, there's clearly chaos here, and that chaos of just the changing scopes and the multiple voices kind of trying to put their input in before a meeting was kind of organized to organize all those voices and get everyone in the same room. It was chaotic. I stepped out. I said, I don't think this corporate structure is going to necessarily be the best way for me to handle this because I'm just going to be spending too much time dealing with everything. Did it in my own dynamic, although not necessarily as precise way. And once the dust settled, transitioned back to the corporate structure. So I don't know if it was the right way to handle it, but it definitely didn't go poorly, and I don't want to say that I would never do it again. So now we're past all of that. The dust has settled, and in these past few days, I've really just been pumping out code, finishing out the project. Like I said, I leave next Thursday. I have 5 days left in my internship, so I want to get this application in a really working, complete state. I do expect that another engineer is going to have to take it over to do a bunch of UI stuff, CSS, kind of structuring the front end. But as far as function is concerned, as far as like the really engineering back end and routing everything together, handling the data structures in the front end, I expect all of that to be done by the time my internship is over. And I consider that a success, considering the variable state that Fusion Patient Search has been in and everything that was expected to me. But in this entire process, I've really learned C#, ASP.NET, TypeScript, Git, GitLab, merge requests, CI/CD pipelines. There's just such a long list of things that I've learned, and I'm really appreciative for all the support that Fusion has given me. So even though next summer I am going to be looking for other internships to really get that diversity of experience and hopefully move to a larger company just to kind of experience what that is like, I really appreciate all the help that Fusion has given me and all the support that they've put underneath me for my career as a hopefully a software engineer. So I just hit the light for this video, so that probably means that it's about time to end things. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you're interested in my computer science, software engineering, like, comment, subscribe. It all helps out a ton. And I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.